From the campus of Yale University, this is Business Talk with Jim Campbell, nationally syndicated across the country on the Biz Talk Radio Network and coming to you from our flagship stations, Yale Radio WYBC and 1490 AM WGCH Greenwich. All talk and all business, 60 minutes of radio with leading figures from the world of business along with the business of politics and sports. No talent, no matter. The first big reality TV stars. We get the first inside look on the rise of the Kardashians in American drama. Tonight on Business Talk with Jim Campbell, Jerry Oppenheimer, a great friend of the show and the New York Times best-selling author of several books for which we've had him on. Here, Crazy Rich, Power, Scandal, and Tragedy Inside the Johnson & Johnson Dynasty. RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in The Dark Side of the Dream. Madoff with the Money. And he's got unauthorized biographies on Hillary and Bill Clinton, Anna Wintour, Rock Hudson, Martha Stewart, Barbara Walters, Ethel Kennedy, Jerry Seinfeld, and the Hilton family. He's been an investigative reporter, producer of television news programs and documentaries, and that new book just out, The Kardashians in American Drama. Welcome back, Jerry.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And, you know, this is another meticulously researched. There's no fake news in here, is there?
No fake news, and one of the things that really made me happy about this particular project is the fact that so many people who were in Robert Kardashian and Kris Kardashian's inner circle agreed to speak for the first time publicly and did so on the record. Their names are in the book. There's no unnamed sources. I really hate that. I think we've discussed that about my previous books.
Mm-hmm.
That, I really think credibility for a biography, especially an unauthorized biography, really needs the sources you spoke to identified. Otherwise, you got to question the agenda of who's talking and what they have to say.
Interesting. So tell me, why did these guys open up to you, and did Kris Kardashian sort of authorize it? Because under this, whether it's good or bad publicity, that's good?
Well, yeah. I mean, she'll take it any way she can get it, but no, it's certainly not authorized. Kardashians, the whole gang of them, declined to talk to me. You know, what I do whenever I write one of my biographies is send a letter, let the subjects, in this case subjects, know that I'm doing this book, and if they are open to talk to me or respond to questions when I finish all my reporting, to answer anything that might be controversial, but nothing from them. In fact, I never even heard a response. I was thrilled, though, that the people who agreed to talk to me were really part of the inner circle. In fact, Robert Kardashian, who really is a focus of my book, too, along with the whole gang of Kardashians. But Robert was kind of an unknown. When he died in the early 2000s of esophageal cancer, the New York Times headline said, Robert Kardashian, 59, dead, OJ's attorney. And that's all the world really knew about this guy. I mean, his family's fame happened after his passing. However, the Kardashian name was known around the world because, the day of the famed O.J. Bronco chase, and O.J., of course, was one of Robert Kardashian's closest and best friends. It was Robert Kardashian who was given the job of reading the missive, the letter, almost like a suicide note that O.J. had left before he escaped in the white Bronco with A.C. Cowlings. That Bronco chase with the LAPD guys in their black and white cruisers chasing him on the 405 freeway is right up there in a way in terms of reality, true reality television, and happening before the eyes of millions of people around the country, almost like the Kennedy assassination, in terms of no one will forget where they were when they saw that Bronco chase. I mean, the O.J. story was literally the crime of the century, and Robert Kardashian was right in the center of it.
It is fascinating. You also addressed this. There's always been question about he was carrying, I think, a suit bag or something of OJ's and maybe a small case, and there was questions of, were the murder weapon in there or did the stuff disappear? You kind of addressed that.
Well, I do deal with that. In fact, I interviewed a cousin of Robert Kardashian's whose family owned a basically a dump in the city of L.A. And the L.A. homicide investigators showed up there, and the cousin Pauline Kardashian told me they suspected that Robert had possibly dumped the murder weapon, which, the knife, and some other evidence there. It was never found. But yes, he sort of became focus for a time of the investigators because he had picked up O.J. at the airport at LAX coming back from Chicago, where he had allegedly gone and gave himself a great alibi right after the murder of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. But nothing was ever proven that Robert Kardashian had a role in it. Now, Robert Kardashian was a born-again Christian. I mean, he was a very religious guy, and there's a great story behind why he became a born-again Christian. So he was very honest. I think he was, he reached a point by the end of that month-long trial that was televised nationally that his good friend of decades, a guy who was partners in business with him, who was a roommate in Robert and his brother's bachelor pad in Beverly Hills when he was when OJ was running away from his wife because she had caught him fooling around again with women. He turned out to be kind of the unsung hero in the whole Kardashian story because he was a good guy.
I was going to say, doesn't that make him kind of a tragic figure? I mean, first of all, he basically trusted that O.J. was innocent at the start.
Exactly.
And then he basically ends up being completely isolated.
And this came as a great surprise to me because it had not been covered in any of the media. The books that were written, I mean, Jeff Toobin wrote a book which was really well done about the O.J. case. Everyone missed it, that his involvement in the O.J. case really destroyed him financially, emotionally, in many, many ways. I mean, he lost business. People would spit on him in the street. I have anecdotes from close friends of his who agreed to be interviewed and talked about how badly he was treated. And, those sources told me that they believe his involvement with the O.J. case was one of the reasons that maybe he developed cancer, that the stress and anxiety of that whole drama.
I was surprised also in the book that he was one of the main cooperators with Lawrence Schiller's book, and wasn't Lawrence Schiller's book always kind of implying that O.J. was guilty even though he was hooked up with O.J.'s team?
There was that implication, but, Robert's decision to get involved with Schiller in the book called An American Drama was a bad decision. He was promised large sums of money. One of Robert's close friends told me that Robert had told her that he was promised $4 million, and when she told me that number, I thought, how could a guy get $4 million? I mean, if Robert believed that or he was just boasting to this friend, I don't know, but he really did get screwed. He thought he would be part of the book, and in fact, the New York Times review, which I read, really kind of made him look like a total loser for, he didn't get the hero worship that he was hoping for. Friends told me that one of the reasons Robert, besides the money issue, because he needed money at that point, because most of his business had gone down the tube because of the O.J. case, he expected that he would be able to market himself as a loyal hero. He could give speeches around the country. He could generate income that way, and that didn't happen either. So, he ends up as kind of a sad guy who, in the very end, because of that cancer, was down to 80 pounds. Died very quickly after the diagnosis.
Would he have been proud of his girls, etc., that have made so much money in this entrepreneurial venture, or would he have been disgusted that they did this reality show?
Well, I talked to Robert's brother, I talked to other family members, I talked to close friends, and they tell me there are two sides to that. He'd be proud of the entrepreneurial spirit. He would, and the fact that they were able to make money, because he basically was an entrepreneur. I mean, at one point he had like 20 different business cards in his wallet for different different kinds of enterprises he was involved in. He was involved in, partnerships with OJ, which we can talk about, that sort of thing. But at the same time, because of his true religious nature, I don't think he would have been proud of the fact that Kim's fame and infamy came about because she, made a porn tape a la Paris Hilton with a boyfriend of hers, and that's really what helped get them Ryan Seacrest's attention and got that reality show, which is now in its 10th year, which is amazing.
Which is amazing. You listen to Business Talk with Jim Campbell. After this somewhat tragic story, we'll meet the momager next. We're back with investigative journalist Jerry Oppenheimer, and the momager is next, and that, of course, is Kris Kardashian. Give us a little bit about her backstory. What is her talent to begin with? Her
talent is exhibitionism, narcissism, banality, if that's a talent. No, what's interesting about Kris, and you have to give this woman some respect, and I think, you having read the book, and hopefully your listeners will read it, I'm not a big fan. I did not go into this project with any negativity, but I didn't go into it to turn it into a fanzine-style book about how wild and crazy and neat the Kardashian kids are. And Kris's life is kind of interesting. I mean, her roots, basically, if Hillary Clinton was going to describe, Kris Kardashian Jenner's family roots and family circle, she might call them deplorables. I mean, they come from, and I trace her genealogy somewhat. They come from the uneducated parts of the Deep South, the Midwest. Her mother was kind of rednecky. Her grandmother really raised her. When she was 16 years old, she grew up in the out on the West Coast in the San Diego area. Her father, an alcoholic and abusive to her mother, abandoned the family when Kris was 7, and she has a sister, doesn't have a good relationship with her sister. Her sister has had a lot of problems herself. You rarely hear or see her. So Kris was 7 when the father left. The sister was 4 years old. The mother then hooks up with another guy who's also an alcoholic. They had good-tasted men.
Yeah.
And that guy becomes the stepfather, and the family finally gets their act together a little. And but by the time Kris is, I interviewed, I went back and I found people who went to high school with her. And actually the high school she went to, Claremont High School, was the high school used as the model for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was kind of interesting. In any case, at 16, with her mother's good housekeeping, seal of approval, and a big backer of her, she began looking for a wealthy guy. I mean, she was not interested in education, was not interested in going to college, was interested in hooking up with a wealthy guy and getting married and having 6 kids. Well, at least she claimed she wanted to have 6 kids. The fact that she did, you got to question where that fits in the script. And, as a graduation gift from high school, she went on a trip to Hawaii with her girlfriend, and she met a guy by the name of Cesar Sanudo, who was a professional golfer on the PGA Tour, who was at least a decade older than her, latched onto him, moved in with him eventually when she was like 17, 18 years old. And during the course of that relationship, she actually runs into, at a racetrack, she meets the first guy at a golf tournament. She meets Robert Kardashian at a racetrack when she's betting at the $2 window. And he falls for her. And they began, she's living with the golfer, but she begins having an affair at 17, 18 years old with Robert Kardashian, who's the future patriarch of today's Kardashian clan, and she's the future matriarch of the Kardashian clan. And, and at some point, and you couldn't even make this up in fiction, Kardashian is introduced by his brother to Priscilla Presley, who is then divorced from Elvis, but under the control of Elvis in many ways, which I'll mention to you. And he thinks at that point in time that Chris is too young for him, even though he's hot for her, and he thinks she's very good-looking, and she was quite attractive then. Too young and not sophisticated or educated enough for him, because here's a guy who, graduated from USC. He has a law degree from University of San Diego Law School. He comes from, a upper and middle class family as opposed to Chris's blue collar roots. And so he and Priscilla Presley begin a kind of hot and heavy relationship. Chris, furious that Priscilla Presley has entered, her hope for a marriage or relationship with Robert, goes off and becomes an American Airlines flight attendant. And, eventually, though, to make a long story short, she and Kardashian,
Whereupon she starts cheating on him, right?
Well, it takes a while. But, then you bring into the story that, the Chloe story. I mean, there's been all this gossip and rumors about...
Yeah, well, let's address that. I was going to do it in the next segment, but you just brought it up. I mean, the old Who's Her Daddy?
Right, exactly. In fact, I think that's the chapter title in my book. But, Chris suddenly now becomes a Beverly Hills, one of the platinum wives of Beverly Hills. I mean, Robert Kardashian is doing well. They have this beautiful home in Beverly Hills, and he still doesn't think that she is sharp enough and educated enough for his milieu of friends, and he starts giving her, and this was so bizarre when a close friend of his told me about it, he starts giving her self-help audio cassettes to listen to learn things about entertaining, how to run a household, how to be a good mother. Of course, she doesn't,
She skipped over that one.
She skipped over that one. When she went off and had an affair with her, she was in her 40s at that point in time. Robert had, in the 80s, OJ's, and there's this close relationship between Robert and OJ, and OJ's wife, who later is murdered, gets breast implants, and Chris says, I have to have 2 of those myself. Literally says that. She says it in a memoir she had written in 2011. And she uses, now she's suddenly bored with Robert. She starts complaining that, she got married. She got married very young. She didn't really have a life, so she goes out with these new breast implants to find a guy, and she finds she's then in her early 40s, and she hooks up with this guy who's 23, 25 years old, a so-called professional soccer player, and starts having a wild affair. I mean, the affair is so wild and so crazy, and cheating on Robert, who has been such a good husband and father, that she even takes on dates, her secret dates with this guy. She takes her 5-year-old daughter, Chloe, in the back seat. I sometimes think, even having finished the book and having researched all of this and reported all of it, why these kids, Kim and Courtney and Chloe and the boy Rob, are so close to their mother, other than the fact that they're just like their mother, and it's all about the money and the wealth, because they know how badly she treated their father.
Boy, this is a great way to end this segment, because we're going to get into the rest of the Kardashians in the next segment. So stay with us. We're back with Jerry Oppenheimer, the author of The Kardashians, an American Drama. First off, the Keep Up with the Kardashians, the original show, I guess, Kris had a vision that it was going to be like an updated Brady Bunch.
Yeah. In fact, she even purchased a house that looked like the Brady house on TV. She at the time the show started, she was then long divorced from Robert Kardashian. He had long died, and she was now with one of the great characters in this drama, Bruce Jenner, and Ryan Seacrest, who's well known as a producer of reality TV and just a general entrepreneur in the television business, saw the potential of Kris and Jenner and this gang of kids as the next big reality show on the order of the Osbournes, which Seacrest thought was the best reality show, the one with the craziest things going on. And it's been going for 10 years. This is the 10th anniversary of that show. Ratings are lower. When the Kardashians are on covers of magazines, less of those magazines are sold. The Kardashian Inc., as I call it in the book, isn't on the great financial grounds it was on before. Deals, very lucrative deals they had with Sears, for example, fell through. Kris was given a shot by the Fox news stations to do a afternoon interview show. She thought she could be the next Oprah Winfrey, and that lasted for like 5 or 6 weeks, and it was canceled. And and one of the things I deal with in the book is what happens when the Kardashians show gets canceled. Of course, all great TV shows eventually reach their end. Cheers and MASH and all of those, and the Kardashian thing will happen too. But Kris has a plan.
We'll get to that. I think that's pretty amazing plan too. Could you say that she would risk destroying her family for money and fame, since the dysfunctionality seems to progress over time?
Well, when she when she had the affair with Robert Kardashian, I think it wasn't so much ending it for money and fame; it was for sex. I mean, it really was. I mean, she talked about that in a memoir. Mm-hmm. If I'm understanding your question correctly, it wasn't until later on that she felt she had the confidence and the know-how and knew enough people around town to get the TV show.
Mm-hmm. I guess where I'm coming from in part, too, is you look at the crack-up of Rob Kardashian Jr., of Lamar Odom,
right,
of divorces, multiple marriages, a sex tape. A normal mother might say, we need to pull this in for a while and make sure that we all survive and everything, instead of seeming to exploit each one of these kind of mini tragedies.
Well, the exploitation is what has made them. In essence, I mean, they don't really care what they're doing. If you were allowed to have full-on sex on that reality show, they would be doing it. They would have no problems with it.
By the way, for Kim Kardashian, that sex tape, was that planned, marketed? The Paris Hilton model, was Kris involved in it?
Exactly. No, I deal with that in the book. I mean, I had written a biography of the Hilton dynasty from Paris to Conrad. House of Hilton it was called. And I dealt, of course, she was the first of these young girls to become famous and infamous doing a sex tape. Kris Kardashian, Kris Jenner, was good pals with Paris Hilton's mother, Kathy Hilton, and Kim was great buddies with Paris, and so it was planned. There's no doubt about it. That was planned, and Kim came out with something like $5 million.
Wow.
Suddenly was launched, and but you had mentioned Lamar Odom, and Lamar Odom, of course, was one of the many boyfriends of Khloe Kardashian, and they were hitched for a while, and they're hitching their marriage Lamar Odom and Khloe Kardashian, also resulted in a reality show. But the big news involving Khloe is that for a number of years now, since the Kardashians became famous, there have been rumors, tabloid rumors, gossip column rumors, celebrity magazine rumors that Khloe was not Robert Kardashian's biological daughter, and in fact one of the rumors was that O.J. was the father. And that was an area I wanted to look into, which I do in the book. And what I found is that O.J. definitely wasn't the father, but I was able to have a series of interviews on a number of topics involving the Kardashians with the Kardashians' minister, Reverend Ken Gullickson, who is an evangelical minister who is very well known on the West Coast. In fact, one of his claims to fame was taking some very famous rock stars who were Jewish and converting them to born-again Christianity. And Robert Kardashian became a born-again Christian, but without going into the background on that right now, I interviewed Ken Gullickson, Reverend Gullickson, and he told me that he and Robert became very good friends. And Robert was an elder in his church as a born-again Christian, and Robert confided in Gullickson, who told me that Robert told him that he wasn't Khloe's biological father, that in the period when Khloe would have been conceived, Robert and Chris were not having a sexual relationship, that their marriage was in tatters already. And Robert just said that I'm going to raise her as my own. I don't want to be involved in I don't want to have a family scandal now. He probably knew that Chris was definitely having affairs at that point in time. And there are rumors, that I mentioned in the book. One of them, because Khloe looks so much like this guy who's a Beverly Hills hairdresser who was part of that very fast-moving crowd of Chris and Robert and O.J. Out in L.A. But definitely, and I also talked to others who were close to Robert beyond the minister, who told me that Robert had confided in them, close friends of his, confidants who he knew from childhood when they were in high school together in Los Angeles, that Khloe was not his. Now, of course, Chris and Khloe and other members of the family have, claimed that, of course, he is their father's daughter, and there was a complicated kind of legal document in which Robert once signed that said he had 4 biological children, which would have included Khloe. But I spoke to the lawyer, Neil Hirsch, who also helped handle Robert's divorce, and Neil told me that he didn't even remember that document. He had no idea where it came from. He doesn't remember Robert ever swearing to it. So, but in the meantime, Chris has said, there's a document that says Robert swore he had 4 children, and that's what we're going by. And, of course, the media went with that because, a sworn document is a sworn document with Robert Kardashian's signature on it. So that mystery was somewhat solved, but I think it's still not completely solved.
Seems like a big revelation that you uncovered, at least to me.
Yeah.
What about Bruce Jenner? Now, I always thought that he always looks like he was completely miserable being in the whole deal, the reality show and everything.
I think you're right. I mean, he looked miserable. He probably was somewhat really miserable because he was holding a big secret inside of him.
Yeah.
But I think that was his shtick. I mean, don't forget, reality TV is pretty well produced and set up, and I think that was, his character for the show.
Is it scripted totally? I mean, does it reflect the real Kardashians, or is it just so scripted?
I think it pretty much reflects the Kardashians, but a lot of the bits that you saw in the various shows over 10 years were produced. you had to have a narrative, and the producers give them the narrative, and then they did it well, for what it is. I mean, it's pure junk, but they did it well, and they made a lot of money from it.
All right, you're listening to Business Talk with Jim Campbell from our flagship stations, WGCH Greenwich, WYBC Yale Radio. And in our final segment, we'll talk a little bit about how much money the Kardashians have made. Author of Unauthorized Biography, Jerry Oppenheimer. We finish our final national segment. We're, of course, mainly a business show, so I've got to ask about the economics of the Kardashians. Did you uncover their net worth, where the money comes, etc.?
What's amazing is Kim Kardashian, a few months back, I believe, was on the cover of Forbes, of all magazines, because of the tens of millions of dollars they've generated. They live in enormous homes in the Los Angeles area. They fly in private jets. They are driven around in Bentleys and Rolls Royces. And what was so incredible was last year in Paris, which generated headlines worldwide. It was reported that and I deal with it in the book, $11 million worth of diamonds were lying around in the hotel room that Kim was using while she was in Paris for the fashion shows, and a gang of thieves entered the place, stole the diamonds, and took off. Now, when that happened, there was a lot of schadenfreude in the media. I mean, major fashion editors from the Washington Post, from the New York Post, from other magazines questioned whether there was any truth to it. That was this going to be part of the reality show, and it was more of a scam on the public. But it actually was true. And she did lose those jewels. They've arrested a lot of people over in Paris, a gang of professional thieves. But what it showed again was how much money they have. That she could have $11 million worth of diamonds.
Yeah, hanging around.
Hanging around like, Zippo lighters. Just amazing.
What do you estimate the family's worth? And is the net worth, is it in Chris's control? How does it work? You talk about each of them having a lot of money.
Each of them have their own revenue, but I think from what I was able to get out of some people who are familiar with that Chris is like an agent. She'll get 10 or 15% of everything they generate, plus her own big salary, plus her own investments. I mean, they're probably worth close to $100 million, I would think, today, which is amazing. And you had asked me earlier on, whether Robert Kardashian would be proud of that. He would be, in terms of the fact that they made lots of money, because he had lots of ideas for business enterprise. Even though he had a law degree, he was really interested more in, making money, and money is a big thing with that family, the Kardashian family. In fact, when I first approached one member of the Kardashian family, he agreed to talk to me, and he wanted to have his lawyer present. The first thing he said was, "How much am I going to get paid for cooperating in your book?" And I said, "Well, we don't think that way." But that kind of underscored,
It's amazing. You talk about that Kim can charge guests to her birthday party $2,500. She's got 90 million Instagram followers, 50 million Twitter. They get paid for tweeting product endorsements. It's almost mind-boggling. And other thing, they get different amounts for their roles on this show. She gets the highest at $80,000, I guess, and then Kendall and Kylie get the lowest at $5,000. So it's very interesting how the whole thing falls out.
And what's sickening about it is that corporate America goes for it.
Oh, big time, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, that's unbelievable.
And the Sears thing amazed me, too, because the number $600 million was the sales figure. They got royalties of $30 million into their pocket. Yeah. But $600 million, that's a lot of money to generate from brands that, I don't know what the Kardashians would have to do with class and elegance, but maybe Sears is a good fit for that market. Is she serious about public policy or issues, or is it all ego and narcissism?
I think it's a combination of both, but I think it's more ego and narcissism, and you know, we've learned now that ego, narcissism, exhibitionism can launch a big, major political career.
As you finish up, did you, as we finish up, did you like the Kardashians? What surprised you the most?
Oh, you know, I think one of the big surprises was more of the Robert Kardashian side.
Yeah.
And one of the things I uncovered during, 2 years of research was that back in the mid-'70s, the Kardashian family made their money, and I'm talking about Robert Kardashian's family, because Chris moved into that family. Robert Kardashian's family was in the meatpacking business, and in the mid-'70s, federal prosecutors began a wide-ranging probe into corruption in the meatpacking business. And the Kardashians' business, Great Western Packing, became one of the targets of that probe. And Robert Kardashian's brother, Tom Kardashian, was indicted, made a plea deal, was convicted of bribing government meat inspectors. In other words, housewives in Los Angeles buying Kardashian meats thought they were getting higher quality meat than they were getting because they had been bribing to get that seal of approval. And he was convicted, spent 20 years under a dark cloud, and finally was received a full and unconditional pardon from George Bush, George W.H. Bush. And he and I had extensive interviews with Tom Kardashian. And he spoke about it, and one of the questions that was never answered was, why did George Bush pardon Tom Kardashian?
Very interesting. Of course, nobody's really ever heard of that. It's something that you've uncovered.
Exactly. And in the book, I actually have the pardon document, the photo of that. And one of the things Tom said to me was, well, it didn't involve any money, any campaign contributions, but out of the blue, he gets this. And Bush was not giving many. Yeah,
handing them out.
Was not handing them out. And this was in the very end of his term. So, you have corruption, you have indications of organized crime because Kardashian's father, Robert Kardashian, and Tom Kardashian's father, was known to have been tied in. And, of all the millions and millions of words written about this family by the media, no one ever knew about that until it's revealed in this book.
The book is chock full of revelations, and I'm kind of glad to end it on Robert Kardashian because he is kind of a tragic figure and maybe one of the good guys in this family. Thanks to Jerry Oppenheimer, always writes fascinating, unauthorized biographies. The Kardashians in American Drama is the latest one. Thanks to Jerry. We'll await the next unauthorized bio coming down the road. Every couple of years he has one. Thanks to our national audience for listening. We'll see everybody next Sunday on Business Talk with Jim Campbell.